you want to speak first? Do you have to speak first, or do you want to just?
I'm very happy just responding to any questions or comments that anybody has. We'll leave it at that.
Just general question about that. When you guys issue like repaving repair contracts, do you include performance standards, like how long it should last, how long the work, just the quality of work? And the reason that I ask it is that I've seen repairs done where sometimes I feel in the cracks last 3 months. You know, you don't know whether someone's seeing that and bringing it back, or the contractor that did that work is being called back to repair it, or whether they're incurring that expense again as a taxpayer. And I've seen major repaving jobs like 35th, California, where it's as if they don't invest enough time in doing the bases, and then 2 or 3 years later, it's all just kind of falling apart again. So I'm just curious whether we have those performance standards, or how we balance the cost of a long-term repair versus a shorter-term repair.
So, is your question entirely for city-initiated work, or even a contractor who's building condos and making some cuts in the street? Or
I was being very local. Repair works in West Seattle. They repay 3 blocks of 35th, or 3 blocks of California. 3 months, 2 years later, you need it again.
I need to know more about 3 years later, need it again. If we repave the street, I'm not familiar that 3 years later we're repaving it out again.
No, you're not. But I'm saying that the potholes will come back, the pavement is deteriorating again, there's ruts in there, so it's crushed and stuff. Yeah.
So between potholes and Delridge is a big gulf. So Delridge is the fullest, most robust curb-to-curb repair, where we lined and put in a whole new surface. And hopefully when that's done, we don't come back for quite a few years. So those kinds of repairs, major repaving, typical arterials, of course, has a life that's, could be double digits, well over 10 years for repaving, a complete repaving. At the opposite end of it is a pothole. A pothole will obviously not have nearly that length of time. And in between, we have what are known spot repairs, which could be twice the width of this table. It could obviously be the size of the room, but they're not going to be a mile of street. So there'll be sections. Beach Drive, there are examples all over. And they will have a life in between. So the standards are that potholes, and the problem with potholes is, best way I can explain it is that you're really not solving the underlying problem. So the underlying problem is a greatly deteriorated street where water is getting in, and that water has action underneath. So no matter what you do to the hole, it is only a matter of time before the symptoms return. So it's a little bit, I don't know if it's a good analogy, it's a little bit like a Band-Aid. It doesn't really solve whatever might be creating a real skin problem or infection underneath, but a repaving does. And so I think that's, maybe I'm beginning to get at your answer, or not. Ask me some more, and I'm happy to.
No, that's fine, actually. I think you kind of addressed it, because it sounds like it's roughly sort of like 10 years, depending on...
Yeah, so real repaving, we hope, will be even better than 10 years.
So,
and then the other thing is, if it's concrete, concrete will have much longer lifetime than asphalt. So, for example, I'm sure many of you know the Spokane Viaduct and bridge, so that is concrete, so that will hopefully last even longer. And there you're talking maybe 20 or 30 years. So you look at the most dramatic example, I-5. So I-5 in the city limits. So that's nearing 50 years. And so I forget if it was built approximately 1965. So 50 years is 2 years away. And so they're getting near the end of that life of the concrete, mostly concrete. And so that's why soon after we finish all of our big projects, and we think we're, oh God, well, this is over. Spokane, viaduct replacement, Mercer, whatever, just when we think we're good, maybe the state will find its money and start doing I-5. So we don't have a timeline, but that's sort of the biggest example I can think of on the far end.
Can I follow up on this question? So in terms of the contractors and the contract, and when a contractor jumps in or is contracted to do a project like that, is there a performance standard? Is there something built in their contract that says that this road has to hold up for 5 years or 10 years?
So typically the way it works is that picking the repaving, which has a real book-length contract, a real legal document, basically what we will have in there is the engineers will determine exactly what we put down. So how far we excavate, what we put in terms of coarse rocks, finer rocks, everything beneath it, and then the asphalt or concrete on top. So basically, we specify the material, we specify compaction, so when they put in the rock, they don't just throw it in loosely. They're required to compact. There are inspections that are done on the level of compaction, how tightly everything is compressed. Then there are inspections and quality control on the asphalt or the concrete. So we will take borings, send it to the lab, and they will verify that what was put on the ground matches the specs and has the right material in it, the right level of compacting, the right depth, and all of that.
So the contractor doesn't actually end up with, he's got to guarantee this for 5 years. All he has to do is install it according to your engineering specifications.
Right. And it doesn't say that, because in theory, if you're paying an engineer, a professional engineer, and the other thing to keep in mind, of course, is that for road work is done all the time, everywhere. So presumably, there's some pretty good standards from federal highways, from the state, and we use the same standards that are adopted on, typically it's a state standard, that are well tested over time, and I think that's what we use to ensure that the standards are met. But then we make sure what they build meets the standards. We don't just take the work. Obviously, once it's done, you don't know if they put in 18 inches or 8. So you got to watch them all the time. Same thing with, we inspect rebars. So when there's concrete and you have metal, you can see them sticking up. We inspect to make sure they put them in at the right frequency and the right distribution, and if it's the right diameter of rebar and all of that. And sometimes the stuff that they put in does not match what's required, and then we make them take it back. So the most dramatic case was on the First Avenue ramp onto Spokane, and it was being manufactured in, I think, Montana. And when those big girders that would go up first and then connect to Spokane, they weren't done right. And we sent it back, and they paid now. Back to you.
I'm wondering if you personally reviewed a packet of information on a letter sent to you 6 weeks ago by 15 residents of our cul-de-sac at the end of California Avenue as it passed Thistle, documenting recurrent episodes of cars crashing into our neighborhood over the years, resulting in multiple cars being totaled, damage to personal property, and personal injury, including permanent brain damage on one driver. Have you seen that?
Yes, and in fact, I looked at it, what's today, Wednesday? I probably looked at it last week, but not longer ago than that.
Okay, I don't have anything else to say because we do have a meeting tomorrow with Dong Ho Chang for the department.
Right.
But I'm hoping that we can come to some permanent solution to this problem because someone is going to get killed, and I think the city will be liable since our neighborhood has been complaining of this for at least the 30 years that I've been living there.
So I looked at it, I saw some photos. I don't know if it was a VW that was wrapped up. I think it might have been, but I could be wrong on the make of the car. And I'm guessing that I saw it last Thursday or Wednesday. And it came to my attention, and I know Don Ho was speaking with you. I didn't remember it was tomorrow.
So I'm going to follow up because I have specifics. 35th from Morgan north was repaved in 2000, and I think it was 3, 4, 5, something around there. And I called up and I said, what's your warranty period on this road? Because it's already started to develop potholes along the edge where it joined with the original concrete that they didn't replace it. You can see it slumping in. So to me, I thought it was only 5 years that it would degrade. Well, it turned out to be 8 years. But 8 years into that repaving, and that it is already demonstrating failure.
So I want to write this down. It's just 35th between
Morgan and go north to like Mount Providence, like the entrance to Camp Long.
Yeah, the Camp Long.
Yeah. So if you drive
roughly
that,
2003.
well, I could go look at my records, but you guys will have it. But I think it was,
okay.
when I called, it was, and this was a couple of years ago because I was really cranky a couple of years ago. It was, 8 years at that time. So we've been living with that for an additional 2 years since I called.
And you just have to remember whether, I don't know how you would be able to tell, but did it look like a quarter mile of paving, or is it more like the size of this room, or a couple
No,
of this room?
it was along it.
A long
and I
stretch.
told whoever, I'll go see if I have email on it. But
Oh, fine. You don't have to, because I can look it up and then I'll know.
Well, I told the guys, I said, you guys need to come out and take a look at it. Oh yeah, we will. So you should have some inspection
Okay.
records.
It's about 3 lanes wide. There's like 2 lanes of original concrete that's held up okay except for the cuts. And there's 3 lanes of blacktop. When they repaved it, they ground, like 2 or 3 inches, put the blacktop down on the east side, I believe. And they did it from, like you say, from Avalon to about Morgan Junction, I guess. And it's funny because I drive up on 35th. I would stay on the concrete because the blacktop side is all bad.
Well, I'll be going home that way. I live in Queen Anne,
So
I'll
that
be
was,
driving-
yeah.
I'll be
that's-
driving.
Drive on the outside
on the
lane.
stretch.
Yeah.
So start looking when I get to Camp Long.
Oh, no.
Oh, you'll have
from
felt
here,
it.
from here, going from here, start looking at.
Okay. All the way.
Paul.
Okay.
But that's why we ask these questions. What's your warranty period? Because we're seeing workmanship that's not even holding up.
A
decade.
I grew on this one. And on Trent as well, there were cracks between the concrete panels. And there was an article, I think it was maybe the West Seattle blog article, that announced that they're going to fill the cracks to keep water from getting underneath the panels. Which was fine, they did a nice job, but probably 3 months, so it's all broken out, the cracks are all back. So it's like
Crack sealing, and I don't know if that's what you mean, but we've recently restarted crack sealing, which is, the idea is the same as pothole. You want to stop water getting in there. And again, that itself is not going to solve problems, but at least it somewhat halts further deterioration. Other questions? So if I want to get back to anybody on questions, and I'm writing it down, do I mail it to you?
Yeah.
And then you will know how to get it to other people or to you?
Well, both ways.
Okay.
Can we get your information before the end of the evening?
So, I'd like to do that and
This is
follow
sort
up.
of a general question.
Well, those are important questions, so I want to get back on any of those and get back to you. There's some things tonight I might know the answer to, maybe I might not.
Chaz?
So, Peter, I'll be the torchbearer. You've probably heard we're having some real issues with the bus bulbs at the corners of Fauntleroy and California Avenue at Morgan Junction. The sighting of the bus bulbs was brought to Metro and SDOT's attention a year ago that a bus stop there would block traffic up, everything behind it. So everything going west on Fauntleroy or turning north on California gets stopped. Everything going south on California or again west on Fauntleroy gets stopped on the other side. The bus bulbs are literally around the corner from the major intersection. So we've put up with this now for 5 months. Obviously, the morning rush is the most difficult. I've lived in this neighborhood for 10 years. I've never sat through 3 lights to get from my house to the other side of Fauntleroy. And I recognize that transit has a priority. So you guys have to do something. And putting a lane divider in to prevent people from crossing over into the left turn lane is a very smart safety move, but it's not answering the question, which is the favoritism shown to Metro, admittedly because it is a major stop on the rapid ride line, has caused a major deterioration in service for pedestrians, for cyclists, for people in cars, and frankly for other buses waiting to turn the corner like the 128. So whatever you do, you literally have to improve the situation of throughput at that intersection. In the morning, the line's back up the hill. That's a mile practically from Morgan Junction to my house. And so up the hill would be about 6/10 of a mile. That never existed before the bus ball. So, and I recognize I'm one of the few that, abided by the RCW and let the buses in, so I know why we're doing this. But we've got to come to some resolution. And the other question I've got, and it's an observation, and it's again on the SDOT / Metro regrading of the West Seattle transportation system. And we talked about this at the time too, and that is the BAT lanes on Alaska. Why is Alaska Street the only BAT lanes in the city that are not timed? They should be 6:30 to 9 a.m. heading in the downtown direction, and 3:30 to 6:30 p.m. heading in the West Seattle direction, and the rest of the time Alaska Street should revert to 4 lanes. There's no reason why it shouldn't. So that's just an observation. But other people can weigh in.
All in favor.
Anybody oppose anything I've just said?
But I have a question though. I'm late to this, I'm sure, but why are those out into traffic? I did a route between Barton today, past the ferry. I'm fortunate enough to live and work in West Seattle, so I'm not going downtown. But I did notice that there weren't any of those things bulging out onto 35th, and I assume that's because you want traffic to move. And I don't understand why they're bulging out onto California Avenue or at the ferry, which is crazy. It's just jamming up traffic. And why are they bulging out? I don't understand that.
Well, Peter can't represent Metro's position, but I can.
Well, I can tell. I mean, I'm not the question because I realized a lot of people who feel just the way you do. And it's not only in West Seattle. It's not just the sea line. And I mean, it's any number of places where we're asked those questions. And I think that really Chaz kind of gave a response that you've only got limited space. And so you have to balance transit, pedestrians, bicycles, cars. I don't know if I left anything out, but pretty much covers it. And you want to do it in a safe way. And the theory is that to keep driving the way some of us think we might want to keep driving forever is not sustainable in the long run. And therefore there has to be a transit system that works well for everybody, which I realize may not yet be the case. But transit is certainly not going to be attractive if it sits in traffic and does not have some, as you call it, prioritization. That's the theory. And I'm not saying it's good or bad. I'm describing that's the theory. And a lot of people subscribe to that. But it's a little bit of a, I only have so much green time to give at an intersection. So I can give it to crossing movements, I can give it to cars, I can give it to buses. And again, the theory is that, buses are already not as good as our individual cars. Our individual cars are more comfortable and have whatever. And so to get people to take a car, you want them to have a predictable, consistent, reliable service that is somewhat fast, somewhat rapid, as in bus rapid transit. And so those are the trade-offs you go through at the intersections. And I fully realize everything you said. So just illustrate that other people don't like what we do is, on 3rd Avenue and other places where we have BRT, we have buses stop in line. They used to go over to the curb, get people on and off, and then they would get back in traffic and sometimes have to wait. And the city has the opinion that buses, which are pretty crowded, I understand the C line is pretty crowded, which is another story in itself, but that's a lot of people on the bus. So, you know, you just have to make those decisions, and it's really hard to make everybody happy. I mean, I think that's, and we realize that. So there are a lot of angry people for all the reasons you said. I can't speak specifically about the bulb outs that you asked me about, but generally, the concept of bulb outs is to reduce the distance that a pedestrian has to cross. I don't know if that's actually the case in the one you just described, but that's part of the reason it has to do with safety. But it's really a trade-off, and we really understand. There was an article in the Times not that long ago, and I've heard from some of you. So it's very hard to make people happy in that.
So kind of related to that, the development that's happening in the junction right now, where we're increasing the density by at least a factor of 10, right? I mean, it's a huge amount of people. How involved is SDOT in decisions about those developments? Like, I realize we vacated an alley for that project between Alaska and 42nd or California and 42nd on Alaska, but it doesn't seem like we took any concession to maybe make that street a little bit wider while there's major development going on there.
So
we're increasing our density dramatically, and we're reducing our traffic capacity through those areas. I live 4 blocks from the junction, and I have 3- and 5-year-old children, and there are days we can't go to the junction because we'd have to walk. And I mean, our access to the junction is tremendously diminished.
And there's no place to park.
There's no place to park.
It's all stripped away.
So to answer your question of how SDOT is involved, so the overall question on density, how much development will go in, is determined by the city's comprehensive plan. So that's not updated every year. It's, I forget the last year. I think they're working on an update now, which is either next year or the year after that. So it's been a while since they've done a comprehensive plan. It all starts with that. So just like you're reading maybe in South Lake Union, there's a major rezone, and they're talking about how high to make the towers near the lake and all of that. The same thing when the comprehensive plan is done, and then the zoning underneath. So that's typically done by the Department of Planning and Development, DD. And then SDOT gets involved. So they have the comprehensive plan, which also has transportation element in it. And then I don't know if in addition to all of that, you want to know when they build, do they have to submit a traffic control plan? When there's a street vacation, what process do they go through? How do we make sure if all of them are building at the same time, you can even get around? I don't know if you also are asking that. Quite aside from how high it'll be, whether we pay attention to the actual
It
project.
feels like I'm in real estate as well, so I appreciate that developers are in business to make money, etc. But these are huge projects with big dollar signs, and it doesn't feel like we're getting enough back in terms of public improvement, especially the things like transportation when these projects are being approved. I'm curious, you know, when 1,000 apartment units go up in the junction, is SDOT saying for 1,000 more people to live or 1,000 more housing units to exist in the junction, we need, you know, this would help with traffic in exchange for those, you know, vacations and zoning changes?
So the city, gee, I think you asked me that at the last meeting that I went to. So, is it Barker?
Deb
Ms.
Barker,
Barker
yeah.
asked me the question. I forget what that meeting was, Chaz, that we had where Mr.
The
Desmond and Mr.
transportation
Mesa were at.
Right.
Yeah.
What was that called?
That was is that sustainable?
Sustainable
SDOT?
Seattle
Yeah.
Transportation Fund.
Not that long ago. So I was asked the same question, not the same question exactly, but the question was, does Seattle have what's called transportation impact fees? which in other places that I've worked at, when you're a developer and you have a proposal, in some cities there's actually a formula that will say if you have whatever, 1,000 units, you shall pay this much, or you shall contribute to a specific intersection improvement. So, for example, Children's Hospital, totally obviously not in this area, but they had a development proposal for a major hospital expansion. And they had to do a bunch of things, and including, for example, from our point of view, they had to improve a signal at Sandpoint Way and 40th. But they didn't have fees to pay. When you do the vacation, vacation, then there's a whole process that is run through SDOT where they not only have to pay the fair market value for the real estate represented by this particular swath, it's called an alley, but they also have to demonstrate some public benefits. So when Amazon came in 2012 and proposed a huge, 3.3 million square feet, that's 2 Columbia Towers, something like that. They provided a 4th streetcar and 10 years of operating costs. But we do not have fees that are kind of a formula fee that development pays in the city. And there's a lot of good history for that, way before my time.
So to that end, could these folks who are doing all these units pay for more another bus? Or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5? It's not a fee.
That is possible. And I just don't know exactly how the Department of Planning and Development may be requiring them. How did they come up with the signal for Children's Hospital?
Yeah, that's
why
a good question.
when they did this,
Yeah.
did they ask for that? I just don't know the answer.
The DPD person works with a transportation planner of their own. What's the relationship between SDOT folks and that DPD planner, transportation planner?
You want me to answer that, Susan? You want me to?
Well, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
This gentleman over here had a question.
But I can answer that later.
Come back.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I've got a lot of questions, but one of them is, what we're talking about is infrastructure and right-of-way, the city streets and sidewalks and ways for us to motor around or bike around or walk around. And so I'm interested specifically in who gets credit for the decisions that have been made. Is there a list, or is there anything that's available to the public who's making these decisions on the bulbs or on reducing lane capacity by 1/3 or maybe 2/3 in some situations where you're eliminating access around buses or you're eliminating lanes. Being a Seattle native, I've noticed that parking specifically in West Seattle and pretty much all over the city has diminished by maybe as much as 40%, 50%, over the last 20 years. And so who is it that is or should be getting the credit for these decisions, and how could the silent majority maybe have contact with those people to let them know what their feelings are?
So, I guess the specific designs and specific lane configuration is totally an SDOT. So that part is pretty straightforward. But it's not like individuals are just making up stuff. So it all comes from a comprehensive plan that might say things like transit is more important than this. It might say that Avalon, to make BRT work better, as you get out to the approach to the bridge, we will eliminate this parking in a peak hour. So their policies, so you start off with, if you believe transit is important, and if there's a city policy like that, then that governs what we do. We don't just choose to make up stuff.
But who are the individuals that make that choice, and what feedback do they have before that choice is made? and you mentioned the comprehensive plan, and I feel that the comprehensive plan is being drafted as these changes are made rather than a plan, a roadmap to follow.
So the comprehensive plan is usually a pretty involved process that staff and Department of Planning and Development, with a lot of public input. Every comprehensive plan that I've ever been involved with has a tremendous amount of meetings on what to put in the plan. They go through preparing a draft. That goes through the Planning Commission. It then goes to the City Council. And ultimately, the policy document that's called the comprehensive plan is very much an expression of the City Council. Another good example that will matter to you, based on your questions, SDOT is preparing an update of the bicycle master plan. So there was one done in 2007, and there's an update right now. And as that's being done, there are a lot of people who want to have more bike facilities, and again, they realize that you can't have everything. You can't have bike lanes and this lane and that lane and also have the same amount of parking. So at some point, if you were to come to our public meetings or when the council looks at the plan and say, whatever your opinion is, that in your opinion, there ought to be more attention paid to people who don't necessarily bike, who need to park, need to have more lanes, whatever, that would be another venue where you make it known to people. But ultimately, those plans are adopted by the City Council, which is the policy body for the city.
Sharon?
I appreciate your coming, by the way, Mr. Hahn, but I do want, we only have 30 minutes left in this meeting. I want to make sure that we focus this discussion around what's going on in our neighborhood, which is here in West Seattle on this peninsula. And there's a lot of discussion you've been having about the comprehensive plan, but really, what I'm more interested in is the Growth Management Act and how we're focused on that or not focused on that. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't overstep, my questions to you, because you're not King County, you are not Rapid Ride, but 3 items that you are responsible for are parking, neighborhood traffic, and right-of-way management. And as I said, I live on that hillside in the triangle. We've been greatly impacted by Rapid Ride, the sea line coming right down Alaska Street. It's kind of a hodgepodge of how do you get down Alaska Street anymore from Fauntleroy to 35th. There's an enormous amount of erosion going on that roadway now because those Rapid Ride buses do weigh a lot more, and they are pitting out Alaska Street dramatically. And one thing that I worked on early on, before it even started, was how are you going to mitigate, how is the city going to mitigate the impact of running a major transportation corridor through a residential neighborhood rather than taking it onto the arterial. At that time, I was told that there was going to be some mitigation that would be along the lines of putting trees, making it less of a harsh environment for people that are walking to the bus or trying to get to the YMCA, trying to develop and keep the Triangle area as a small community kind of business environment. And to date, you built the tree wells, but there isn't a tree that's been planted. I personally walked that entire stretch of roadway with one of your people from SDOT, and Nolan Runquist and I met on the 14th of November in 2011 about making that corridor through there a more pedestrian environment. It was approved by DPD. It was approved that it was going to be a pedestrian corridor all the way from Fauntleroy to 35th. It doesn't feel that way. We don't feel like there's been much improvement to that. And I'm asking you to refocus on that so that we can get that taken care of. We have ongoing issues that have to do with parking. I appreciated the fact that the city came forward and did a parking survey. We worked through that whole scenario. and it was determined that some parking should go away, some parking should remain. There are 3 businesses currently on Alaska Street between 36th and 38th that after it was approved that we have this parking in place and they can maintain ongoing customers coming and going. There's now there's been a discussion that is flowing around the fact that maybe the Department of that Rapid Ride is feeling that it's impeding their accessibility and they want to readdress that. We don't want it readdressed. We came to that conclusion. We worked with you. We worked with the county to come up with what was appropriate for parking in those areas. We do not want any more parking reduced on Alaska Street, which will impede those small businesses to remain in business.
Between 36 and 38, right?
Yes. The roadbed damage is starting to really become an issue because when you have large commercial and or apartment complexes such as Link, etc., the roadway that was not rebuilt, it was not taken down to the grade and rebuilt, but it was asphalted over. Now that they have built numerous other apartment complexes there, they have striped in, filled in, constantly refilling, and that roadway is becoming a seesaw to get down through. You've made this a major corridor for transportation, but you have not supported how you're going to make it successful. And that neighborhood, whether it be north or south, we still want to walk to the junction, we still want to get to the Y, and we still want to take Rapid Ride, but you need to address what's not happening there and be willing to come out and assess what is going on there. And when can we expect you to come?
I'd be happy to come out and look at this and walk with you and Nolan or anybody. Nolan is our, I think he may even have a title like code enforcer.
He is, and we discussed it greatly.
Our tree guy.
We even volunteered that we would plant those trees, but what those tree wells have become is that overnight, and I witnessed it myself this morning, someone drives along, they've taken out a tree or done some work in someone's private yard, and they pull up beside it and they shovel out what they don't want to take to the dump, and it's all debris. It's not loam or anything else. Getting prepared to plant a tree, they're just filling up your well. So we need to do something about that. And I can show you exactly where that is.
Yeah. So I will make sure that, if possible, immediately, I don't know how immediately, what that means, but, you know, like before.
Real soon.
Sure. And that we can come out and look at some of these.
We need to re-walk that roadway between Fauntleroy and 35th because there's been no mitigation for that neighborhood for the impact that we have to suffer.
We only have 5 minutes left. We still have 3 people who have asked to speak. So.
Okay, I'll go super fast. I'm going to go from the junction backwards. Our Morgan Junction folks go through the junction. Neighborhood planning. So there is a neighborhood plan. There were growth targets in the Alaska Junction. Over 2 years ago, they blew past those. They were at 104% of what was planned. At the time that neighborhood planning was done in the Alaska Junction, there was no plan to reduce capacity down to one lane and save 1 lane for transit. In fact, all the parts that talked to transportation there was a West Seattle transportation agenda that said, bring us Rapid Ride, but give us priority lanes over the bridge, right? Which happened. But there was no discussion about single laning down in the junction area where all our people have to cross through. So the point about that is, in neighborhood planning, there's a capacity. Part of it is you do a capacity study. And at the time,
Do you remember how long ago the neighborhood
1998. 98, 99 is when Morgan Junction and Alaska were both adopted.
The Juno one, the Friends of the Junction.
Just one thing I would say is that bus rapid transit did not become funded until 2006.
Oh, yeah, no, I know that. It mentions
So that's
the
why
monorail.
it wasn't in
Yeah.
the plan on how it would be implemented.
Piece, the answer to his question is, the neighborhood plan was created and those density targets set with the existing capacity that was allowed. Since the targets weren't reduced, the targets are still the same, you've reduced the capacity on the street. So we have a disconnect that has happened between what you could plan for and what the real world has become, and now you're going to shoot past, go way on beyond the goals of the plan. Just because you can't control development. You can't say, stop, you hit the target, right? So the other thing is, around that bus, please do some additional post-studies. That whole lane was put in, and it came from the planners.
Which bus?
Rapid Ride.
Okay.
14 seconds is all that lane bottom.
At
14, no.
All
In
of
the
them.
bat.
In the bat, that's
lane.
right.
That's 14 seconds that we're paying for with now. I want to know what the reduced, are we at level F service at those lights to go across Fauntleroy?
Yes.
Yeah, you have to do so what were the unintended consequences? They projected that we would drop to level D or something like that. I think we blew past that. You need to do a post-study to see what happened. And then my third point was, you never really kind of answered Chaz's question about what about those dang curb bulbs in Morgan? And what has the service level dropped to at the Fauntleroy, California intersection? That's it.
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, excuse me.
Oh, was Vlad
Vlad
first?
next. Yes, Vlad is.
Sorry.
I'm going to be brief. Peter, I appreciate how hard your job is, and I appreciate and your comment about the traffic mitigation fees or something like that for the city and how important that would be. I completely agree that as a funding deal, to have funding that would be associated with development, that's to me just a natural thing. And all around Seattle, it's in place all over the state. People, there are cities doing it. I have no idea. It's a political decision, obviously, and not yours. But in terms of specifically on what happens in West Seattle, the way SDOT has implemented specific designs, just specific designs like the Morgan Junction is such a great example. That was, and I'm an architect and a planner, and I just look at that and I just go, it's almost like somebody deliberately designed something to not work. I cannot understand it. It's just not, and I don't know, there's something really wrong in the system when they can't anticipate the problem when it's drawn on paper and they have to wait. And people would come to community meetings, they'd see the plans and they go, this isn't going to work. And the comments would be, I don't know, they go into the black hole and then the stuff would still come out. And this just happens over and over and over again.
Can
so,
maybe not the same day I come out to see Sharon at some other point, whatever. Can I just join you in?
Absolutely. I think you could just walk it and you can just look at all the different alternatives that could have made it work better. And there's just so many different ways that it could have worked, because what's happened now is people in West Seattle are pretty genteel. They get along, whether they're on a bus or a bike or a car. But I've just noticed in the 16 years since I've been here, just in the last 5 years, suddenly there's almost this animosity that's built up, and a lot of it is driven by stupid decisions that create situations that are awkward instead of helping move things.
So I'd love to see those examples, and particularly, and it wouldn't be just me, but the Traffic Management Division has a new director. We have a new traffic engineer who's ultimately responsible. And
Who's that?
Dong Ho Chang is
Okay.
his name.
Okay.
And I can tell you that all three of us would be really interested, whether it's coming out with Sharon as a you, and really seeing examples of things that have been done, whether it's 3 years ago or 10.
We should do a little tour, and we'd love to do
see for
that.
ourselves examples.
You'd probably have, The problem is keeping it small enough because there'll be so many that want to be part of that.
Yeah, we can try and prioritize it.
Because it's not, this isn't really, when people start saying, oh, it's about prioritizing the bus or something, that's not how people think here. We don't want to be in that game. We want to have a community that works as a total community and not be into some kind of battle all the time over some philosophical issue. It's to us, it's, anyway, I'll stop.
Thank you very much for that.
Thanks.
I think we might be in touch with your office and see if we can have some of the councils that have specific questions.
But can I count on
Yes,
being
Sharon
able to
and Vlad.
get together?
Absolutely,
Yes, definitely.
absolutely.
Yes.
And there could be more, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I want to start with a couple of things.
Okay, we're going to have one more question, and then unfortunately
It's a
we're running
break.
out of time. Susan's quick.
Right, at Flint Leroy in Alaska, we have, is it a 3-story hole?
Which will soon be filled.
Will it soon be filled? Yeah, so it's a very deep hole. It's been dug for almost 4 years, and that shoring was only supposed to really, be effective for probably 1 year because they thought they were going to be building. And I have concerns for the Alaska right-of-way. And I'm wondering if SDOT is monitoring the health of that roadway to make sure that our roadway is not being compromised by a huge hole and questionable shoring right adjacent to it.
4 stories tall. It's 4 stories tall, the hole right against the roadway.
Okay, we'll also get back to you on that. The answer is supposed to be that we're not supposed to have a hole that over time will eat into the road and then undermine it, nor are we supposed to have what Sharon described, buses, I think he used the words eroding or pitting the road and that sort of thing.
Kind of like First Avenue before you rebuilt it.
Pardon?
I said kind of like First Avenue before you rebuilt it.
You mean downtown?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much
I think
for...
the other hand.